Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today's video is my top 10 books of 2023 so far, and I've read some really good ones. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books, and of the way too many books that I've been reading this year, there have been 10 absolute standout 5-star reads. And I have mentioned in videos before, I am notoriously stingy at giving out 5 stars. So some of these came in possibly slightly under 5 stars, but this year I decided to be generous and to give 5 stars to these books if I felt that spark. So yeah, 5 stars for me is more of a gut feeling. It's more of like a book that gives me that extra connection, that extra something that just makes me love it. I have had exactly 10 5-star reads, so this video will be covering all of them, and if you want to see more details of some of these books, I will link all of the wrap-ups where I first talked about them. Let's get straight into the absolute best of the best of 2023 so far. So in at number 10 we have quite a quiet book, quite a coming of age novel. We have Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. I read this way back in, I think probably March, for the Booktube prize, and this was one of my favourites in my category for the Booktube prize. A much sort of quieter, subtler 5-star than some of the books on this list, but just a book that I really liked, and I think that if you are a fan of a coming of age novel, I think you would enjoy this. So this follows main character Frankie Budge over the course of one summer where she made a new friend called Zeke, and they made a poster, and this is all about what ensued from that poster making. So Frankie is looking back on that event as an adult, and I really enjoyed this one. It's quite short, but I thought it was quite sweet. I am a big fan of coming of age type stories, and this one was no exception. I thought it was a really great read, and I have since acquired my own copy of it. I did originally read this from the library. I would say that on this top 10 there are very few books that are in the same genres as each other, so there's quite a wide range of genres, and yeah, I very much enjoyed this coming of age tale. In at number 9 on my list is the first entry for non-fiction. This one's a memoir that I read very recently and enjoyed very much. So this is How Not to Be Strong by Alex Scott, and I have talked about this quite a lot recently. I saw Alex Scott do a talk at the Women's Prize Live, so I have talked about this pretty extensively, but this basically is Alex Scott's memoir detailing her struggles with mental health, her childhood, all of the things that she has overcome to be the success that she is. I think Alex Scott is a very inspirational woman. She has gone through a career in football, playing for Arsenal and the Lionesses most notably, but she did play for other teams, and after making many achievements in the game of women's football, she has carved out a very successful career in the media as well. So a woman that I very much admire, and I thought that this was a brilliant read. Really enjoyed it. At number 8 we have some sci-fi, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I had been very hyped up for this series by lots of my friends reading it and enjoying it, but particularly Gemma from Gemma Books, who has not stopped telling me to read Becky Chambers ever since she read Becky Chambers. So I'm really glad there are at least 3 more set in the same universe as this, because I thought this was really well done and very interesting. This was the kind of book where I really wanted to take my time and sink into this book. I really enjoyed the world and the universe that Chambers was creating, and I loved the way she created it through her characters and not really through traditional world building. So We initially follow Rosemary Harper as she joins the crew of the Wayfarer who make tunnels through space, but actually this is more of an ensemble cast book, and we do follow all of the crew of the Wayfarer at some point in this book. I thought it was fantastic. There's a lot going on in here, and I cannot wait to revisit this universe in Becky Chambers' other books. Next on the list, I have an extremely sad book, a book that is sad from start to finish, and this number 7 on my list of top books this year is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, from an original idea by Siobhan Dowd. And this is an incredibly sad book that follows Connor, whose mum is dying of cancer. And that is an incredibly sad concept, an incredibly sad outlook for the book. And of course, it gets even sadder as the book goes on. But this is all about dealing with grief and accepting changes in your life, even when they are incredibly sad and terrible changes. And I loved this, even though it absolutely broke me. What a book. Amazing. But absolutely do not go into this thinking it's going to be anything but devastating. In at number 6, a book that I do not have to show because it is an audiobook that I finished very, very recently. It's actually the most recent addition to this 5-star list, and that is Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. This is the second book in the first Law series, and it's also the sequel to The Blade itself. Now, when I read The Blade itself last year, I thought that Inquisitor Glocta, who we still follow in this book, was one of the most incredibly written baddies that I've ever read, and I still thought he was absolutely brilliant in this second book. I also grew to love other characters who maybe weren't my favourites in the first book. It is a grimdark fantasy. I'm not a fan of fantasy, so if I can really, really enjoy this book, if you don't like fantasy or you haven't got into fantasy yet, this could be a book for you. This series could be a series for you. Absolutely adored in this book the characters of Logan Ninefingers and Pharaoh. They really came into their own in this book and just absolutely showed off their layers, and they're fascinating to read about. Again, this book and this series world builds through the characters' eyes. So I absolutely love that, and I think this is a brilliant series. I think Abercrombie is a great author from what I've read so far, and I can't wait to read book 3. So that brings us to halfway on the list, and the first book in my top 5 of the year, and it could end up even higher by the end of the year, is The Secrets of Heartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden. Another different genre. This one is historical fiction. It's set in the Victorian era, and it follows Margaret Lennox, who is going to a new job as a governess at the eponymous Heartwood Hall. And she soon finds out that Heartwood Hall is much more mysterious than she had anticipated. This book just really owes a lot to Victorian fiction. I thought that the writing was simultaneously really well done and very Victorian in tone, but also at the same time much more accessible than a Victorian novel. It pays homage to Jane Eyre and to The Tenant of Wildfowl Hall, and it does so wonderfully. There is so much in this book that I just think is brilliant, and I think it's a book I will definitely reread in years to come. I cannot believe that this is a debut novel because I think the writing is so intelligent and just absolutely could not put this book down. It's so gripping, so mysterious, yet it's also very, very good historical fiction. So highly, highly recommend this one. Katie Lumsden is also known as Katie from Books and Things, so do go and check out her channel, and I would definitely recommend her book very, very highly. Particularly if you are a fan of historical fiction, you need to go out and get yourself this book. I've broken all of my rules for book 4. My usual rules for a top 10 are to not include any rereads. But I will tell you why this reread has made it into my top 10, and it's not one of my Agatha Christie rereads. The reason why I don't include those is because I have read them both times as adults. This one I read originally as a child, and this was my first reread as an adult. So I'm counting this anew. I gave it 5 stars. It deserves to be up here, and that is the wonderful Goodnight, Mr. Tom by Michelle Magorian. I read this for the FOMO book club, which I host with the marvellous Gemma from Gemma Books and the absolutely wonderful Jack from Spread Book Joy, and I'm so glad we chose to read this, or reread it in my case. At FOMO Book Club, we read books that we fear we missed out on over the years, and I'm so glad that Gemma and Jack are no longer missing out on this book and that I have reread it, because Magorian just crafts such a good story. And this is not just a good children's book, this is a good book for adults as well. Very, very devastating, lots and lots of grief in this book. And I don't think I realised as a child what a great character Mr. Tom himself, Tom Oakley, is. Tom Oakley is a widower who has an evacuee unexpectedly come to stay with him, William Beach, and together they sort of help each other to cope with different things and cope with their grief. And I didn't realise as a child what a well-rounded character Tom Oakley is, what layers he has. I love the way Magorian writes about grief. I think she does an excellent job, and this is just a truly heartbreaking story, but it also has so much hope and so many wonderful things in it as well. A really, really great piece of writing. If you too have missed out on Goodnight, Mr. Tom, it's not too late to read it. It's one of those children's books that is well worth a read as an adult. So that was my number 4 pick this year. In at number 3, a book I do not yet own a copy of, but definitely will own a copy of at some point. A book that absolutely broke me and had me ugly crying. I talked about it in my recent video as a book that made me cry, and that was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And this book has had so much hype that I thought, when I had to read it for the Booktube prize, that it would not possibly live up to that hype. But I don't often say this, but that hype is justified. This was an unusual 5-star in that I didn't love everything about it. So there were aspects to the writing style and turns of phrase at times that I didn't enjoy, and the characters. Sadie and Sam, who this book centres around, just infuriated me at times. They pushed all of my buttons. They just were absolutely infuriating, but I really, really wanted to know about their lives. They're the kind of characters who you wish you could revisit again after the end of the book. So these are 2 characters who meet when they are very young in hospital, and they end up making video games together. If you're a fan of video games, I think you'll love this book. If you're not a fan of video games, I think there's still a lot to love about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It's not a book about video games really, it's a book about friendship, I would say, predominantly, and love in all its different forms. I don't want to spoil anything about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but in spite of any flaws I might have found with this book, it was 100% 5 stars. Absolutely ruined me at a couple of points where I was just absolutely sobbing. A really well crafted book by Gabrielle Zevin, and I will definitely be seeking out other books that she has written. In at number 2, another book I don't have a copy of because I listened to it on audio, and I would highly, highly recommend the audio because it is read by the author and it's like having the author talk to you about all of these topics. This is the final non-fiction to make it into this list, and it is of course Getting Better by Michael Rosen. I have absolutely raved about this book. It's so sad, but it's so brilliant. This is sort of part memoir and reminiscences on different things that have happened to Michael Rosen. The loss of his son is an extremely sad section. His son Eddie died at the age of 18 from meningitis, and Rosen very honestly and very vividly describes Eddie's death, and that was absolutely devastating. And Rosen also talks about coming to terms with what has happened to him during the COVID pandemic, and he spent, I think, 40 days in hospital, most of it in a coma, and a lot of it was about dealing with that and the aftermath of that. And without going on and on and on about this book, and without going into every detail of my own life, I love this book both because I love Michael Rosen anyway and think he's a wonderful writer and a wonderful human. I also have never read a book where I related so much to what someone said about coming out of hospital after a long period in hospital, and his reflections on those experiences and the feelings that he felt. I have not read about that anywhere else, so this book really, really spoke to me, and that is why it is my second favourite book of the year, and definitely by far and away my favourite non-fiction I've read this year. This book does deal a lot with mental health, physical health, but it also is a very positive book about what you can do when you've been through these things, what Michael Rosen has done to help himself on the road to getting better. There's some brilliant, brilliant writing about writing and how writing has helped him. And I just absolutely adored this book. Can't wait to read more Michael Rosen books from recently. And this was such a hard book to read, but so, so worth it. Absolutely adore it. And adored the audiobook with Michael Rosen reading it himself. So there's one last book to talk about, my number one book of the year so far, and I think a book will have to really, really go some to beat this book to the top of my charts this year. I think everybody watching knows what it is because probably lots of you have watched my mid-year freakout tag, and if you haven't watched that, then you've probably seen me talk about this book elsewhere anyway, and you know how much I love it. And it is, of course, of this book right here, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Now, this is the only book to make this 5-star list from the Women's Prize, even though I read the entire long list. Just nothing came close to this book for me, and nothing has come close to it this year. In Demon Copperhead, Barbara Kingsolver takes David Copperfield as her inspiration and relocates it to 1990s and early 2000s America in the Appalachian region that she is from, and sets it during the opioid crisis. And Demon is just such a great character. The first person narration in this is absolutely second to none, and I just loved every minute of this. There are moments where your heart is absolutely in your mouth, where you can't bear what is happening to Demon. Amazing book. I think that this is like a whole nother level of writing, a massive, massive accomplishment in terms of both how Kingsolver relates this back to Demon Copperhead and has written her own story. It's just wonderful. If you haven't read Demon Copperhead yet, read it. It's just such an incredible book. Yeah, I'm going to stop talking about it because I talk about it forever, and you don't need to hear another video of me going on and on about Demon Copperhead. But suffice to say, it will be very, very hard to beat this book in the second half of the year. I hope I will read a better book than this, but I find that very, very unlikely because this was amazing. Let's put it in pride of place there. So that was my top 10 of 2023 so far. If you have a top 10 video and I haven't watched it yet, please do comment down below and let me know that it's out there so I can go and see that and find out more books that I should read that could be 5 stars. I would love to hear your recommendations. I also would love to hear from you in the comments. Do let me know what's been your favourite book so far this year, or your favourite top 5, top 10. Let me know all of them in the description down below. Let me know your opinions on my 10 that I've picked. I hope that we all have a wonderful second half of the year with even more good books. If you have enjoyed this video today, please do give it a like. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching today, and I do hope you will join me again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.